Hi, welcome to All Things Divorce Podcast. I'm Launi Sheldon, your host of All Things Divorce Podcast. Today I have with me Chris Carter-Kent, who is a special real estate commissioner in Arizona. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. Thank you, Chris, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Chris has been doing this for over 10 years, where she actually goes in and helps families sell properties, especially in, where there's no agreement. She does it without necessarily having attorneys, though she works well with attorneys and does actually mostly working with attorneys. But I think she would be so helpful with families who don't have attorneys and who don't really understand that. So we really want to talk about that a little bit today too, because I think it could be very helpful for people who are unrepresented. So Chris also does some training for people who want to be real estate commissioners, and she's been very active in trying to get a new roster out there with people having appropriate qualifications to do it. And I can tell you, as a divorce attorney for over 20 years, there's a lot of people out there who are not qualified to do this. And so you really want to make sure that you pick the right person. But Chris is going to talk to us about what that is. And then also, just as usual, we'll have her information in the description in both the YouTube section and then the podcast section. As normal also this is a disclaimer. We are not giving you legal advice or real estate advice. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client privilege or a real estate agent and client privilege or relationship at all. The information is for information purposes only. We are both only licensed in Arizona. So keep that in mind. However, a lot of, I think what Chris is going to talk to you about will let you know that it might be useful in other jurisdictions. So again, Chris, thank you for being here. And I want to kind of ask you, so just let's first tell everybody what a real estate commissioner is.
A real estate special commissioner is a real estate agent that has been either stipulated to by the parties or chosen by the court from a blind list. And we work specifically under a court order. And that order is our roadmap for helping clients get the home sold.
Great. And you've been doing this for 10 years?
Yes.
Okay. And I know it's really none of our businesses, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What made you decide to do this?
Well, of course I want to talk about that, because that's the reason why I got started. I went through a very contentious divorce myself, where I had to sell a home. We tried using a regular realtor, and then we ended up with a real estate special commissioner, and it was not a pleasant experience. And I really wanted to help people through the process. So after I sold my home and ended up back in the real world after being a stay-at-home mom for about 15 years, I started a business called Your Divorce Concierge. And that morphed into what I do now when I added my real estate license, because I was helping some clients that were in very similar situations to me, trying to get the home sold during their divorce.
And I have to say, I am one of the attorneys that was very sorry to see Chris stop doing the concierge service, because I think she was very helpful to a lot of people, and now that service is not out there. Now I know there are other like coaches and stuff, and maybe they're great. I don't know, and maybe I should probably reach out to some to find out. But you were great you were very helpful, and I appreciated that. So
thank you.
So tell me why tell me the difference between selling a home just while you agree with your spouse and selling a home when you're going through a divorce. Talk to me about what the differences are.
That's a good question. And I kind of make light of it by saying, a lot of times people, when they're selling a home, they're holding hands, singing Kumbaya. They're happy about the sale. They're happy about moving, typically. And even then you can run into some conflicts. But now let's take it, a step further, where they're divorcing. And there's just all kinds of complications that are added because of that, many layers. You've got the emotion of the divorce itself. If one party wants the divorce, the other doesn't. One party wants to stay in the home. They never wanted to sell. That's where they were going to raise their kids and their grandkids. So they've got that emotional connection. And then just anger about the divorce, perhaps, fear of the unknown, all of this can play into conflict. There's financial aspects. The home is usually the largest asset of the community. And in Arizona, we are a community property state, excuse me. And so, everything is split 50-50 typically. And it's the biggest asset. The equity of the house is often used as a bank for offsets and reimbursements and for your nest egg to move forward. And there was one other thing I was going to mention. I'm on the spot, but I'll remember it because I know this is just something I talk about all the time. So it's in here somewhere. It will come out.
And I do, it's interesting, kind of what you were saying earlier about why, like what the difference is, because one of the things that I noticed as a divorce attorney and is the high conflict where there's been domestic violence. Yeah. And this is such a good reason. I know we're going to go on. And one of my questions for you is, when do you need one? But when there's victims of domestic violence, when there's that type of high conflict, when there's been coercive control, it's really a great idea to have that. And so that can be a big difference between, when you're happily and in love, yeah, and when you're not so much, right? You don't ever know who you married until you divorce them.
Right. And, it puts people, when you have a real estate special commissioner, I think it evens the playing field a little bit, because the job of a real estate special commissioner is simply in the very beginning to be not only the realtor where we're doing our regular job selling the house, but I consider myself the conduit of communication between the parties. I'm a trained mediator, so I'm pretty skilled at helping people communicate and resolving some conflict. But you give each party a voice, and that's one of the keys to a real estate special commissioner. And the other thing that I wanted to mention that I had lost track of was the legal aspects of selling the home. When you're divorcing, let's say you've been through mediation, you might have an agreement, a Rule 69 agreement, you might have a decree, and peppered throughout those agreements and decrees are instructions about what to do with the house or what to do with the money from the house. And that is where your divorce makes this transaction different.
Yeah. And really, really a good point, because what we were just talking about, so we did a CLE together. And so what we had just talked about in that was the language that's really helpful to be put in there. And we won't have time to go through all the language. It is on our CLE. It is on our educational video, I guess I should call it on here, for Learn Law. Chris gives a bunch of really great examples of the language. Also, if you just want to call her and talk to her about what that looks like. So, Chris, what would you recommend looking for in someone who is going to be your special real estate commissioner? And then I'm going to tell you what I, as an attorney, looked for. So I want to hear yours, and then I want to say mine.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. And, I think you raise a good point. You should ask questions during your divorce, because you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you don't even know what to ask. So it's really helpful to have a team of professionals around you. I wish I would have had that when I was going through my divorce. I eventually formed a good support team, but it's so nice to have somebody out there that's experienced, that does this every day, that can help you figure things out. So what to look for in a real estate special commissioner? First of all, you want somebody that knows how to sell real estate, and they're going to do a really good job of selling your real estate. They're going to put it on the market. They're going to get it marketed. They're going to try to get the best and highest price for your house. They're going to give you professional advice as you go along. In terms of the legal aspect of what a real estate special commissioner does, you really want somebody that knows, first of all, a little bit about about divorce for your state, right? It's so helpful to understand what's in those agreements and decrees, so we know what to do. We know how to advise you. And then it's also important to have the experience of working with clients in conflict, their attorneys, and the courts. We need to know how to go to court. We need to know how to, write for a motion for a hearing. We need to know how to present evidence to the judge. We want to present evidence for both parties and our professional opinion. And we want to be able to ask the judge for what we need.
So, okay, I love that. And more than just ask the judge for what you need, you have to have the balls to go to court.
Right.
Or, to be able to go there in front of the court. And so if your aunt, Lori is, 70 years old and has been selling real estate, one house a year, just, for some pocket change. And that's all she's doing. She's probably not your person to go to.
Right.
She's probably not. I mean, now if she's, if she's tough, maybe, but you need someone that's not afraid to go to court. And I've seen this, I've had this, and we've had to change real estate commissioners before. In Arizona, there's not this huge amount of people that are just highly qualified for this. Chris is one of what I would call a handful of special real estate commissioners that do great work. And I think it's important that you get somebody. Now, again, you and I, Chris, talked about this. You mostly do work for, with attorneys. You mostly have attorneys request you, and they request you all the time. You're always on the list. I don't know any list that you've ever not been on.
Okay.
And when I say list, that's when each party can produce 3 names, and then they can scratch them off, and the court will choose. Typically, it's better to stipulate. And there's realtors don't have really a dog in the fight, right? They just want to sell your house. So if your ex's attorney says, hey, let's use Chris, or someone else for that matter, you could probably use them. I mean, it's not as if they're going, I know Chris isn't going to just, I don't even know, Chris, what you could do that would be beneficial for the attorney, other than you hold people's feet to the fire, you make the orders, sort of get done, you get the house sold when people don't want to sell it. And I think what a lot of special real estate commissioners don't understand is they may have to go to court for that. They may have to ask for the judge's intervention in that. And you have to not be afraid of doing that. You don't. And by the way, when you hire somebody really experienced like Chris, your attorneys aren't the ones that you're not going to be paying $500 an hour to get an attorney to make somebody do something. And that's such a big difference. And that's such an important part of what you do, that sometimes the attorneys can just be out of it. Sometimes the attorneys can basically just, I mean, I'm not going to say quit, but once the decree's done, they might be out of it. They might not even want to deal with their clients anymore. And now, Chris, you're the only person sort of who is that conduit between the court and the parties trying to get stuff done. And so like 80% of people, in this country aren't represented. So I really would love to see the unrepresented people use this more, because it's the exact same price. It's not as if, Chris, you only get your commission, right? You get your commission, and and that's it. Which, you say is negotiable. I can't believe you negotiate for anything under than 7% when you're doing these things, but I know you have and you do. But I wouldn't, just because it can be very tricky. Certainly if it's a high conflict one. Right. But so talk to me about like what cases are really good for, like, when would somebody want to hire a special real estate commissioner?
Well, I think, like I said before, anytime where there's an imbalance of power, perhaps is a good time. Somebody, one person has always taken the reins of the marriage and the finances, and they're used to making decisions. So this gives that other person a voice, right? And again, you want to make sure that you have an agent that's very experienced at this and is a neutral third party. You don't want an agent taking sides with perhaps the most powerful person or the squeaky wheel. You want to make sure that you're giving everybody a voice. And anytime you think there's going to be conflict, and it's interesting because even the most amicable divorce can run into conflict in the selling the house. And again, it's because of the emotions and the finances, right? You might have somebody that's using the equity for their nest egg, and they want the highest price. They might want an unrealistic price. Yet you have the other person who's been living in an apartment for a year that's ready to buy their own home, and they need to get their name off of the mortgage so they can qualify for their own home. So they want just any price, just get it sold, you know? I think you want to look for, I'm going back to what you want to look for, because I was thinking about this. You want to look for an agent that's highly ethical and that is going to try to get the best and highest price for your house and represent you. And we have dual agency. I'm not a fan of dual agency in these situations because we need to represent the sellers. But yeah, anytime you think there might be conflict, and again, it can be, you know, an easygoing divorce, but there might be something. The other thing, and not every agent is trained to do this. And as a matter of fact, I don't do this myself, but I'm the guide to help them get the distribution of proceeds at close of escrow. Not my job as a realtor, not my job as a real estate special commissioner, but I understand that there is a decree out there that states wife gets reimbursed for this, husband gets reimbursed for that, and it's all being taken out of escrow. So I work with the parties, and I can help look at a decree, and I don't try to interpret it myself, but at least I have some experience in looking at it and saying, okay, you might, you know, we need to talk about this, we need to talk about that. So I have the parties put together their instructions, and if attorneys are still on board, and if the parties want the attorney to review to make sure that they've covered everything, I have all parties sign off on those instructions before we send them over to the title company.
Oh, Chris, that's such a great idea.
Yeah.
And it's very nice of you to go above and beyond. Again, I'm a realtor, and I just became a realtor less than a year ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's sort of above and beyond, right? That's very nice of you to do, to sort of make sure it gets that way. And one of the things that we had talked about earlier when I was saying who should be using your services, I am a huge proponent of victims of domestic violence using a special real estate commissioner. And I say that for so many reasons, but especially because there's just oftentimes a power difference. One person's been, you know, had coercive control used against them for maybe 20 years, maybe more, maybe less, but that they weren't able to really make decisions, and they didn't really have the ability to stand up for themselves, and now they're finally getting into this. So there's the domestic violence victim who's been abused, there's the domestic violence victim who's been through just coercive control, and I say just coercive control as if that's not significant, but it is significant. But then there's those people, and we talk about this in our educational class, that have been abused but find a set of balls, and all of a sudden they're adamant that they're not agreeing to anything that person does, and it's, you know, it's sort of like they just overcompensate for the abuse. They've gotten out of the abusive relationship, and now they're getting strong. They might have a new significant other that's helping them even get strong, and so that's something that I'm sure you have to deal with too, because people getting just digging their heels in when it's not necessarily a time for them to.
Absolutely. Very good point. And, you know, you mentioned the domestic abuse, and a lot of times there's orders of protection. So we're dealing with orders of protection. A lot of realtors don't know exactly how to deal with those. And then you also mentioned, you make a very good point, that they find a support system, and that other person might be trying to have a voice in trying to get the home sold. I had one case where the guy had a new girlfriend, and the girlfriend was thinking she could tell the realtor what to do. It's like, sorry, you're not a party to this transaction. I can't listen to you, right? He needs to have his own voice. So, and then another thing, speaking of all of this, you have somebody that's obstinate and doesn't want to sell the house. Another feature of a real estate special commissioner is we can go to the judge. Like I say, we start off with just a conduit of communication. And if we have problems, that's when we go to the judge, because we can't get something solved and we have the judge resolve it for us. And then we can present to the judge, you know, XYZ might happen, and judge, I need you to help me understand what to do in this case. For example, if we feel that there's somebody that is not going to sign the documents to sell the home, we can ask the judge to invoke the rule that allows us or the clerk of the court to sign documents to sell the home, including the deed. That's an extreme. Hasn't happened very often. I believe I had a case where a gentleman was out of state and was not able to sign. And so it was agreed that I would sign for him, that type of thing. But that rule has to be invoked by the judge.
Right. And again, a really good reason to have a special real estate commissioner where you're very necessary, though I don't think that people need that extreme. Again, you charge the same price as a regular real estate agent,
right?
But they get like this really advanced service, with the ability to go to court. So that's so huge to me anyway. I don't know why anyone going through a divorce wouldn't want to use a special real estate commissioner. And I just think it's really important that they use one that's experienced, as opposed to someone like me, who I haven't been I've been, a real estate agent for less than a year. You want somebody who's got experience. Now, look, I have experience with the court. I think I could do that part great, but I don't have the experience that you have with going through the houses and knowing how to do things. And so it's really important for people to understand that, I'm a lawyer and a realtor, and I think that you have the experience that's necessary. I'm also trained in mediation. Still don't think that I have what it needs. I think you need a combination of all of that.
Yeah.
And I think you've got that. I don't think that there's a lot of people like you out there. There are a few really great ones. But I think you just hold this just a lot of different areas, this expertise in a lot of different areas that are really necessary for that type of sale of a home.
Right. Well, and I think with a lot of jobs out there, it's on the job training, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And every case is different. Everything is going to be different. And, I just wanted to point out some other reasons why we might have to go to the judge. Let's say one party doesn't really want to sell the house, and so they're not allowing showings. They refuse to clean up the house. They refuse to pin the dog that's, barks and might bite, things like that. And we've actually seen where a party has to be evicted from the house because they're damaging the house, right? Right. And we need to preserve the value of the home. So that's another extreme. We can ask the judge to, first of all, the judge would order the person to keep the house clean. They would order the person to show the house, that type of thing. And failure to do that could result in eviction.
Right. Eviction, fines. The judge has a lot of power. And if you're pissing off the judge trying to do this, and not that, Chris, you're beautiful, and I'm sure the judges don't mind seeing you every day, but they don't like wasting their time on people being, bratty and having to go to court. So, so Chris sort of helps, resolve that. And also you can kind of tell them what's going to happen, right? It's not, part of it is you get to threaten people, right? To some extent, right?
Well, I just feel like a lot of times the people just kind of realize that they've hit a wall, that they've got to stop fighting. This has been court ordered. And if they're not getting their way, they just have to realize, I'm not going to get my way on everything, right? And it teaches them to be reasonable, because unreasonable behavior will go to the judge, and the judge can actually fine. It's called a sanction. And they can impose a sanction of up to 1% on parties that are acting unreasonable. And just the idea of that makes people reasonable.
Right. So that's sort of like I have proper com, right? And we edit emails and text messages between high conflict families. So just the threat that you're going to be edited most of the time causes people to not be at least way out there. Some people have mental health issues and they're unable to control themselves. I'm sure you deal with that too.
Yeah.
And another huge one, if you've got a spouse with a mental health issue, really good time to have a special, and you call it real estate special commissioner, which I think is the appropriate term, because a special real estate commissioner is a position held in Arizona by the person in charge of real estate, right?
Okay.
So you're right, and I keep saying it the wrong way. So I'm sorry, but it's a real estate special commissioner.
Yeah, that terminology actually can be used. There's a special commissioner, and there's also a special commissioner in the court. So it can be confusing, but we're a real estate special commissioner. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And folks, I'm going to have her information down below in the description, her contact information. Feel free to reach out to her. I'll have my contact information. And we also created an online class where you can learn more. So that's through Learn Law. So thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks for this opportunity, Launi. It's a great service you're providing. So everyone is learning a lot of great information from you. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.